Hi, my name is Ryan, and I'd like to try and teach you a little bit about how and why the United States and Great Britain dis and then rearmed between the two world wars, and what profound effects those had on the world. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the purpose of this. Simply put, the subject of history, we often get the when and what pushed down, but how and why is, except in these upper-level courses, not often able to be discussed. And this is to say, we all know a lot about what happened and when it happened, but why was it that the politicians made the decisions they did, and why was it that history came out the way it did? This is the most important part of history, I think, because it helps us use it in the future as a tool, as well as understanding what happened in the past. It's no longer a simple, abstract answer, but we have to consider the concrete realities and constraints that were faced by the people living at the time. Also, it's somewhat overlooked. With an easy answer being given, it was very short-sighted. People were just war-weary. We don't understand that this entire interconnectedness that goes from World War I to the interwar years to World War II is a continuous political evolution. This doesn't say that huge mistakes weren't made, and the question should be answered. After all, Winston Churchill correctly pointed out at one time the Western powers could, if they had wanted to, stopped Hitler, who is pictured in the bottom right in World War I with a slightly less goofy mustache, stop them when they had the chance. Well, even if you had foresight, you couldn't necessarily marshal political will behind you. I think everyone knows, basically, the condition of Europe after World War I. We've heard in most of our elementary classes. I really won't bore you with the details. A few of the major ones are there on the page. But basically, this sets up a condition in which the United States and Great Britain have a very large economic edge, which suddenly has to be reared in to a great degree. And the Russians, Germans, and others have used an incredible amount of capital, which is more or less still sitting around. Also, even though millions are dead, a lot of people are still alive. And what I take away from this is, even though four empires are no more, millions are dead from all kinds of things, from war to the Spanish flu, various purges. The first time we talk about genocides, really, in history, the Armenian genocide. The men and machines on the losing side aren't universally, they're not even majorly destroyed. So they can be used again, so they will rearm. However, the West, which has had this incredible machine, doesn't use arm because, or to continue arming itself against this new threat, because of all these problems which were created by having to stop after the First World War. Productive capacity is ground to a halt, simply because the entire course of Europe is at breakneck pace. All of a sudden, someone throws the brake on the train, everyone lurches forward, and there are a lot of problems involved with that. Not only the basic ones of, wow, this war cost a hell of a lot, or what are we going to do with jobs for returning servicemen when we're already trying to reduce this production because we just don't need it anymore. There are things like agricultural prices. They had paid farmers a lot more with a greater demand than what would normally be paid. This reverses a slight trend in the decrease of agricultural goods, and this shock means that automobiles will take a hit. Why? Because farms are the number one market for automobiles at the time. This also means that steel, which is the number one supplier to automobiles, will also have a terrible knock-on effect. All this is cyclical, but the economic problems also interconnect to the political and social problems. Women are going out of the workforce. That's an economic problem, but it's also a social one now, which connects to a political one. For one, they are entitled, and they feel themselves even more entitled to have the right to vote. They'll get it. Also, this new electorate includes a lot of volunteers and a lot of conscripts returning home from the war with very different ideas now about war. Some of them fascist, some of them very liberal. Blacks in the United States have gotten a taste of freedom in the continent, and they've also had the valor of service. They believe they should have more rights. This desire for normalcy is pretty strong. Keep cool with Coolidge occurs in the United States, but there are a lot of social movements that gain ground very quickly, which shows that people were still willing to try and change many different things. All these things go together to create a political gridlock, which makes it impossible for the West to rearm, even when it wants to. Simply put, you couldn't even get the truth out about the Germans rearming because it would destroy your political career, because it would necessitate armament. And that's why Germany is really the leader in this. not only do they dictate really the beginning of the war, of the First World War, they also dictate the beginning of the Second World War. And the reason why is because people don't want to stop Germany. They had some pretty paltry aims in World War I. They were dealt with pretty harshly. Almost all sides agree to that, which is why when Hitler gets started, it's hard to say when he should stop. Also, the Western democracies aren't autocracies. They can't simply use their force and go after him if their people don't want it. And this electorate is tired of war. They've had an incredible number of problems to deal with. Rearmament cannot be completed because disarmament has barely begun. Of course, the only thing that changes this, of course, is Germany. The German response, the continued invasions of its neighbors, make this peace impossible. The only reason the countries decide to rearm again in the West. And thus it is seen the negative effect of rearmament, forcing its hand until at the very last minute it had to rearm against Germany.